Renato finally realized that Lapino was a traitor to the cause, and maybe Renato could use that somehow. Lapino. Apparently, the Mad Rabbit had sold a Pegasus that he did not exactly own. Lapino always wiggled out of trouble, given time. But he was out of time. Lapino's frantic message said that the Ravens were going to kill him for being a rebel spy. And that he had a clever plan. If the fleet reached him first, they'd string him up for that. Never mind the winged horse. Or so Lapino had told him over the far speaker anyway. Lapino had apparently managed to confuse the judge by arguing that he hadn't actually stolen a winged horse. He'd only sold it. But wait, where was the prison? The village was empty. Had everybody fled the Ravens? That was odd. Renato had been here, at this exact place, at this exact time. But this time, there were so many more Ravens. Everybody who wants to die, raise your weapon. All right. Lapino would betray him.
But now Renato knew that. What would Lapino do if he knew that Lapino was going to betray him? Well, he'd concoct a crazy scheme, wouldn't he? And use Lapino's betrayal against him, and it would blow up in his face. Yeah. Maybe he was overthinking this. Well, that would be a fun...
Dirty and bloody, Renato finally reached Lapino. The rabbit was practicing his shuffle. Renato recognized the...
We capture Zenobia, we find out what she knows. And that's the whole war right there. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy.
Capture the Emperor's greatest general, who happened to also be a deadly sorcerer, and... oh, his only daughter? That would be worth it. And it would be nice to see her. He'd always had a soft spot for her. And he felt sure she had one for him.
On the other hand, he could still get to the core of the Sky Ripper, even if he couldn't get the whole thing. It must have great power. To make the Sky Ripper,
It's beautiful here, thought Renato. It was nice to be back with his old war buddy. All right. Lapino was a traitor. But still, it was good company.
there was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time. Renato felt wrong all over. He could feel an almost palpable sickness in the air. And if the land could have tumors, they would look like these monstrous crystals. The forest was quieter than it had been. There were insects, but few birds, if you didn't count the ravens. Renato smelled sick animals and dying ones, but no healthy ones. And getting a bad feeling about this, Renato thought. Maybe Lapino was right. Maybe they should have kidnapped Zenobia instead of coming here. As he held the radiant icosahedron, Renato felt queasy, like dozens of tiny worms were nibbling. Tell you what, said Lapino. I'll take it to the observatory. You attack the Imperial outpost. The Imperial outpost was a vital communications node. Taking it could shatter the Empire's ability to coordinate. And it would be full of secret plans and maps and maybe even rebel prisoners. It was a good target for a hero like Renato. But what if Lapino lost the core to the Empire? That could be a good thing, couldn't it? Was Renato ready to take that risk? Maybe it was better if he brought the core to the scientists himself. Trust me, Renato, you won't regret it. As Lupino vanished into the wilds of the Nexus, Renato vaguely remembered Lupino had a baby daughter, didn't he? And he told her mother he was going out to get some Easter eggs, and he'd never come back. But Renato was relieved not to carry the core anymore. He was already feeling better. And who knows, maybe this time Lupino would get it right. And if Renato could take the outpost, he'd have access to all the Empire's communications in this sector. Right? Renato caught his breath. His joints still hurt, but he couldn't feel the poison in his system anymore. He'd let the armature slip out of his hands to save his friend Lupino. Of course he had to let Lupino take the core. The rebellion needed every man doing his duty. And the rabbit would be no good taking on an Imperial outpost, right? Renato took the outpost with a song in his heart. Soon, he was stuffing his sack with key messages from and to the fleet. Then the far speaker toad chortled a new message. The observatory had been sacked by ravens. Lupino and all the scientists had been taken to the mountains. Why? Why had he trusted Lupino again? And now the Empire had the core. Renato hailed the rebel base to warn them. But their far speaker didn't crowd back. Was the base under attack too? Lupino would have to wait. The core would have to wait. Renato had a very bad feeling that something was going terribly wrong at the rebel base. Its location was secret, but secrets can be discovered. There were Imperials everywhere in the ruins, and dead civilians. The Ravens were killing everything in sight. Renato was relieved to see no rebels among the dead. Maybe the secret base was still secret, but there were huge burn marks on buildings. What monstrous weapons was the Empire using here? The core had great power, and they harnessed it somehow, even though they didn't have the armature. Renato thought about the intel he'd gathered from the outpost. Who would he bring it to?
Who even had time to read it?
He could smell charred flesh and hear screams. The ruins were on fire. But the Ravens had rigged up the core as some kind of burning ray. They wouldn't need to know the secret location. They were burning everything. He was killing them too. Their black feathers littered the path. He would have to take the core from them. It was the last thing he wanted to do.
The rebel base seemed quiet. That was good. Also, it seemed to be burning. That wasn't so good.
As the last Raven fell, Bernardo felt worse than he ever had. The core was killing him, again. The council members cautiously came out into the smoke. "You saved us," croaked the speaker. They would put the weaponized core deep in a cavern, she promised, where its poison could harm no one. They would heal him if they could, she said. No, it's a weapon now. We need one. I'll lead the charge. "It will kill you," croaked the speaker. "I guess it already has," Bernardo said. She bobbed her head gravely. "When all this is over," she said, "we'll name our new capital city for you." He flew towards the Imperial fleet. A myriad ships in disciplined formation, waiting for the signal to destroy the rebellion forever. Behind him, the rebels were charging. If he failed, they would die. And so the final battle began. Everything hurt. It was unpleasant to fight this way. With each blow he struck with his sword, he felt weaker. Yet each time the core fired, it got brighter. As if the heat from the burning ravens and buildings only fed its hunger. He wondered where Lapino was. Wasn't he supposed to be in the battle? No. He'd been captured, hadn't he? Oh, Renado's mind was smoky now, like the burning fleet. He hoped this wouldn't take long. Ooh. The portal led right into the middle of the fleet. It was a glaring weakness in the defense. Vulpus Major, Lando Nardo. If they were going to name a capital city after him, well, he just wished he had a better name. Where was Lupino? He missed Lupino's bitter outbursts. Or did he? Lupino had gotten him into this mess, hadn't he? The core was a wonderful weapon. It swept fire across the fleet. Ravens exploded in its gaze, and with every heartbeat, it grew brighter. He would die. But he would die every inch a hero. Spectacularly, changing history like the legendary heroes of lore. Or was it Jor? He couldn't remember anymore. Renato fell to his knees. The Emperor's bodyguards were lined up before his ship. Fierce ravens, all. And Zenobia. She was conjuring. He could not take another step. All he could do was fire the core. The ravens, Zenobia, the ship, all burst into flames, disintegrated, and blew away. So they had one, after all. The core grew brighter. He shielded his eyes, but he could still see it through his sleeves and through the flesh of his arm. And then he felt heat, as the fire grew to consume both fleets. And then he felt nothing. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer.
Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Bernardo knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Bernardo had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage. Every child knew about the Sky Ripper. As he set foot on the island, Bernardo couldn't help feeling a bit curious. Was Lapino still waiting to be rescued? No. He was probably drinking champagne with the ravens. Did ravens drink champagne? Did rabbits? Bernardo felt oddly thirsty, come to think of it. Why had he chosen the Sky Ripper? Bernardo never made plans that required constant vigilance. He was a hero. He didn't think too much. He just went with his gut and hoped it all worked out. The Sky Ripper was a long shot. He'd have to devote himself to it. No side journeys, no rescuing old friends. That was against his nature. Could he stick with it? The people who had built this castle, did they even know what monstrous weapon lay hidden within their walls? The Sky Ripper could destroy anything it touched, or so the legend said. As the Transcendent Emperor had fought the Lost Gods, thousands had died. But Bernardo had been through wars. The only merciful war was a short one. Sky Ripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers' dreams, anyway.
The device was intricate. No one alive had the skill to make a thing like it. How was it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Sky Ripper had a heart. A core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him. Asked himself why he changed course to confront Zenobia. He'd no idea. Sometimes he would just do things, and he could never figure out why he'd done them. Usually, they worked out. After all, he was a hero. The truth is, though, he wanted to see her, wasn't it? It had been a dozen years since Swordfu School. He'd followed every rumor about her, every scrap of news. Not that he still loved her. After all, she was his enemy. No, it was solely because, know your enemy.
All right, maybe he should stop pretending. He knew exactly how she felt about him. But their love affair always ended with a tragic death. Unless, maybe he could find a way to dodge tragedy. Surely he could, couldn't he? Couldn't do worse with Zenobia than he'd done with the core, could he?
entirely sure how he was going to capture Zenobia. She'd be expecting him. And he didn't have Lapino to cook up a clever plan. Why was it again that he hadn't got the core?
Maybe because the results tended to be disastrous.
These streets were familiar. The swordfish school was closed now. But he had been down that street 1,000 times. He knew that pub. He knew that alley. He knew the alley behind it much too well. No wonder Zenobia had chosen to invade this island herself. Renato slinked through Zenobia's ship, making no sound at all. Where were her guards? Finally, he reached her bedroom. She was curled up on her bed. Oh, he'd forgotten how beautiful she was. How sleek. How soft. He tapped her on the shoulder with his sword. She vanished. And he suddenly noticed he couldn't move except his mouth. In fact, soon he couldn't keep his mouth shut. He told Zenobia everything. Skyripper, the Iblistone, even where the secret rebel... That makes no sense. It's a trap, shouted the Emperor. I'll meet you at the outpost, and I'll bring my interrogators. If Renato came face to face with the Emperor, maybe he could assassinate him. But maybe it would be smarter and safer to turn Zenobia against her father. What are you doing? Asked Zenobia. Did you ever wonder? What kind of proof could you... She caught up with him. Don't you think...
The Emperor had learned enough secrets from Renato to crush the rebellion. It would be a fair trade if the scientist could convince Zenobia to change sides.
observatory was a burning hulk. Dead scientists and black feathers everywhere. The Ravens had burned the reanimated witness to cinders. Renato was stunned. There goes my proof. These were... I don't know. Let's go to the fleet and ask him. Yes. I'll meet you on the mountains. There's something I have to get first. But could he afford to meet her in the mountains? He'd given the Empire the location of the secret rebel base. They would need rescuing. Bernardo was torn.
So he had given the Sky Ripper's core to the Empire. He felt stupid about that.
He hoped the Emperor didn't bring the Sky Ripper against the base. There was nothing he could do to fight a legendary weapon. Bernardo hated when he screwed up. One of these days, he would learn to look before he pounced. But today is not that day, he intoned for his own amusement.
Decided not to tell the Council he'd given the Empire Sky Ripper's core and the location of the secret base. They needed him in battle, not the brig, right? The Raven was slumped in a pile of its own feathers, like a tree in November.
You can't stop us. The Emperor has a weapon no warrior can defend against.
What happened to you? Renato asked. But the Raven chose that moment to go to the great nest in the sky.
So they'd made the cord into a weapon. That wasn't good. The long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good. Renato had never slain so many ravens. The secret base was going to stink of burnt feathers for months. The council speaker was confused.
Our spies say Zenobia has gone berserk. She attacked and destroyed an entire squadron of dropships.
This was amazing good news. He'd shown her the Emperor's evil. Now she'd gone over to the rebel side. Now is our moment. Attack! Renato exulted. They could win this thing. Zenobia commanded half the fleet. Who would follow the mad Emperor when they could follow his heir, who was wise and smart and a brilliant sorceress besides? But what about the core and the Iblis Stone? What evil could the Emperor wreak with those?
As he closed in on the Imperial fleet, Renato liked his odds.
Oh, how had he gotten into this mess? He'd never set out to be a hero. When he was a kid, he'd wanted to be a great cat burglar, until his mother had explained about foxes and cats. And then the Emperor had gone mad and started sacrificing kittens to the lost gods. There were a lot of dead ravens here. Who had slain them?
The portal was heavily guarded. Must go someplace they really didn't want it to go. Stay away from the other guy's sword.
There were raven bodies everywhere. The precision of the wounds. Renato recognized her style.
It appeared that she was single-handedly turning the tide to the battle. Good. That left the Emperor with only the core. Against him, all the rebels, his daughter and her ravens. He wished he was fighting alongside her, but they'd meet up soon enough.
Soon he'd confront the Emperor. Funny that this whole war had come about because the Emperor feared death. And now it was coming for him. There was some sort of lesson there, wasn't there? Zenobia was cutting down the Emperor's bodyguard like they were mushrooms. The Emperor was frantically readying some arcane instrument, brass and hammered steel wrapped around a glowing, thrumming sphere. Skyripper's core. Zenobia! Renato shouted. But he had no idea what else to say. Revenge! She shouted as she cut the last bodyguard down. A ray lanced out of the sphere. Everything around her burst into flames. but her sword seemed only to absorb it. She walked towards Isengrim III like she was walking against a river. Nothing could stop her. They were going to win. Zenobia stabbed the Emperor dead and flicked the moaning apparatus off. She was laughing hysterically. Or weeping, maybe. They had won. He ran to her. "I killed my own father." She wept, and he held her. He told her he loved her. He would pull her back from the brink of madness. But the core thrummed louder and louder. At that moment, Bernardo understood that the core was going to explode catastrophically, and that this could have been victory. The Emperor and his daughter dead, the fleet destroyed. He'd almost been a hero. A legendary one, maybe. If only he and the rebel fleet hadn't been here. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer.
Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Bernardo knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lupino needed rescuing. Of course, Bernardo had a pretty strong suspicion that Lupino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage. As he set foot on the island, Bernardo couldn't help feeling a bit curious. Was Lupino still waiting to be rescued? No. He was probably drinking champagne with the ravens. Did ravens drink champagne? Did rabbits? Bernardo felt oddly thirsty, come to think of it. Why had he chosen the Sky River? Bernardo never made plans that required constant vigilance. He was a hero. He didn't think too much. He just went with his gut and hoped it all worked out. The Sky Ripper was a long shot. He'd have to devote himself to it. No side journeys, no rescuing old friends. That was against his nature. Could he stick with it? The people who had built this castle, did they even know what monstrous weapon lay hidden within their walls? The Sky Ripper could destroy anything it touched, or so the legend said. As the Transcendent Emperor had fought the Lost Gods, thousands and thousands had died. But Bernardo had been through wars. The only merciful war was a short one. Sky Ripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers' dreams, anyway.
The device was intricate. No one alive had the skill. How was it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Sky Ripper had a heart. A core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him. It was a no...
He looked up at the old trees around him. They were so big and so old. They'd been there before he was born, and they'd be there after he'd passed into legend. Was he confronting his own unimportance? What had got into him? He was no philosopher. Anyway, who cares? He was plenty important. He was a hero, and soon he'd prove it.
There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time.
There were fewer and fewer trees. There were only these huge crystalline growths. Had those been here before? He no longer heard birds except for the feverish cawing of the ravens when they attacked. He couldn't smell the small animals of the forest. The mice and rabbits. Where had they gone? And he was getting hungry, too. This was an unhealthy place to be.
The 20-sided core made him feel physically sick. Once he had sneaked into a temple of the dark arts, and he hadn't liked what he smelt and saw there. This felt like that. As quick as he could, he wrangled the icosahedron into the armature.
He carried his prize back to the Farfarer. Now, he had to make his next move.
There was a key Imperial outpost on the Nexus. If this really was some sort of super weapon, he could use it to wreak havoc on the enemy. And if it wasn't, well, better to know that before the final battle. But maybe he should show it to some scientists first. There was an observatory on the Nexus. Maybe he should go there before he fired it. Of course. If you've just assembled a weapon out of legend that can exile... Why had the parts of the Sky Ripper only surfaced now, thousands of years after the Transcendent Emperor had dismantled it? The mad Emperor Isengrim had performed terrible, bloodthirsty rituals to invoke the lost gods. Was that why these ancient artifacts were rising out of the ground? How perfect, then, that the Sky Ripper would reappear to be his destruction.
And hopefully this time, just his destruction.
A legendary weapon was exactly what the rebellion needed. They were outnumbered. The once kind emperor had become a tyrant. But his ravens stayed loyal, for he fed them his victims, and the other animals were too frightened to rebel. Renato shuddered at what the emperor was trying to do. To bring back the lost gods, the Black Harvest, the Black Sun? No. He would stop that toad, no matter what the risk.
Not really.
Renato was thrilled. The scientists seemed to think he'd put the Sky Ripper together right. But one toad was worried.
Yeah, the Sky Ripper could tear a hole in existence itself. There are invisible strings that tie the universe together. If the Sky Ripper cut one, the hole would widen and widen until our whole existence fell into it.
Another toad sighed. Oh, Irving still believes in string theory.
At least go see Calaveras.
Yeah, said the worried toad.
He knows more than anyone else has forgotten about the Transcendent Emperor.
If anyone could tell him how to use this weapon safely, it would be Calaveras. It was he who had told Renato how to find it in the first place. But maybe he had to give up on using it as a weapon. Maybe he had to go to the secret rebel base and ask the generals there what he could do with a weapon that he dared not use.
One way or another, there had to be a safe way to use it. On the way to the ruins of the city of Ubar, Renato had plenty of time to ponder what the toads had said. Strings and holes and something called anti-stuff. Well, he didn't understand any of it, but it made him nervous.
Renato would hear one metaphor and decide the Sky Ripper was safe, and
then another, and worry it was catastrophically dangerous. If it could destroy the entire world, nothing was worth risking that. But if it couldn't, then not using it would be an act of cowardice. Of course, it could be catastrophically dangerous. Renato knew that. But maybe it wasn't always. He would bring the Sky Ripper to the Council. Wiser heads would know what to do.
The truth was, if it wasn't safe, then it was dangerous. They couldn't use it. He'd found the Sky Ripper for nothing. He should have rescued his friend Lupino. Oh, he should have confronted Zenobia. He had nothing but his sword. But maybe the Council would have an idea? The ruins. Why were so many ravens scouring the ruins? Had someone betrayed the secret base?
Was in trouble. They'd have to attack, brandishing a super weapon they could not use. It could work. A raven cawed, "There he is!" And they ran away, cawing. They knew he had the core, didn't they? And they were afraid of it. Little did they know, he couldn't use it.
Wait. If they didn't know he couldn't use it... Yes. A sword can be powerful without ever being drawn from its scabbard. Once again, Renato was dead right. Or actually just dead.
Long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good. Renato barely made it to the hideout when he was shoved into a meeting room. He laid out his plan. They were shocked. Bluff the Emperor with an unusable weapon?
Yeah, it's brilliant, laughed Renato. He keeps sending ravens, none of them come back. How does he know it's my sword?
I suppose there's no harm if it fails. Take the Sky Ripper into a firing position,
Croaked the speaker.
I shall attempt to hail him by far, Speaker.
It was a huge bluff. Reynardo had no cards to play. Just a weapon that could maybe destroy everything he hated and everything he loved. Could he be sure it wouldn't work? No, of course not. Of course the Emperor couldn't be sure it wouldn't work, and he must believe in ancient weapons if he hoped to bring back the lost gods, right? What terms could he offer Isengrim III? Now, he would have to step down, obviously. And accept the rebellion? Was that asking too much? Maybe Reynardo would ask him to make Zenobia Empress. Yeah, his daughter, after all. She would never sacrifice innocent kittens and puppies to bring back the lost gods. No. Reynardo had to seem confident. Overconfident, even. Like he was sure he could blow up the Emperor's ship to hell. I mean, who believes a cautious bluff? Strange. Fighting to place a weapon he could not use. But he could end the war tonight with just a threat. So much more humane than destroying a ship or an entire fleet. And then he would destroy the Sky Ripper in case some other adventurer was tempted. You never knew about some of these other foxes. Soon, it would all be over.
Nothing gets your blood pumping like a bit of killing. Soon he'd confront the Emperor. Again. This time, he'd make an end of him. He'd screwed up last time, but he had a good feeling about this time. He set up the Sky Ripper and let it warm up. Zenobia came out, flanked by a whole platoon of ravens. "I know you, Reynardo. You won't actually use that," she said. "I know what the scientists told you, that it would totally blow up your fleet. You're reckless, Reynardo. Bold, dashing, brave, devil-may-care, wild, impulsive,
hasty, rash, sometimes even a little harebrained, a bit feckless even. You just don't think things through. Oh, get to the point, woman. But you're not crazy. How do you know I didn't go crazy? Demanded Renato, doing his very best to look crazy. Well, go ahead then. Press the trigger. Oh, damn her. She'd seen through him again. She never fell for his bluffs. This was the moment to do something brilliant. To come up with exactly the right thing to say, to make a heroic move. That's what heroes do. But he couldn't think of anything that wasn't obviously stupid. He was too shocked to move. Her ravens came and seized the Sky Ripper. He stared as they pushed it over the side into the abyss. Hey! Oh, I fought really hard to get that. It should never have come back. And he had to admit she was right. She had always been right. It was one of the frustrating things about her. Years later, as he rotted to his death in an Imperial prison cell, Renato was still trying to come up with something clever and heroic that he could have done in that last moment. But he never could. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong. But he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lupino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lupino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage. Every child. As he set foot on the island, Renato couldn't help feeling a bit curious. Was Lupino still waiting to be rescued? No. He was probably drinking champagne with the ravens. Did ravens drink champagne? Did rabbits? Renato felt oddly thirsty, come to think of it. Why had he chosen the Sky Ripper? Renato never made plans that required constant vigilance. He was a hero. He didn't think too much. He just went with his gut and hoped it all worked out. The Sky Ripper was a long shot. He'd have to devote himself to it. No side journeys, no rescuing old friends. That was against his nature. Could he stick with it? The people who had built this castle, did they even know what monstrous weapon lay hidden within their walls? The Sky Ripper could destroy anything it touched, or so the legend said. As the Transcendent Emperor had fought the Lost Gods, thousands of thousands had died. But Renato had been through wars. The only merciful war was a short one.
There it was. Skyripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers' dreams, anyway.
The device was intricate. No one alive had the skill to make a thing. How was it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Skyripper had a heart. A core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him. It was a no-brainer.
Doubt sunk in before he was even out of sight of the Farfarer. Why had he chosen the Skyripper? It was the sort of path he'd always avoided. The path of responsibility, of seriousness. Had he grown up? He didn't feel grown up. He made this decision from his gut, like he always did. Somehow, he'd impulsively decided to stop being impulsive. Did that make any sense?
There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time.
There were fewer and fewer trees. There were only these huge crystalline growths. Had those been here before? He no longer heard birds except for the feverish cawing of the ravens when they attacked. He couldn't smell the small animals of the forest. The mice and rabbits. Where had they gone? And he was getting hungry, too. This was an unhealthy place to be.
The 20-sided core made him feel physically sick. Once he had sneaked into a temple of the dark art, and he hadn't liked what he smelt and saw there. This felt like that. As quick as he could, he wrangled the icosahedron into the armature. The wheels began to spin, then glow. The sick feeling quickly spun away. Now he only felt sad. He carried his prize back to the Farfarer. Now he had to make his next move. There was a key Imperial outpost on the Nexus. If this really was some sort of super weapon, he could use it to wreak havoc on the enemy. And if it wasn't, well, better to know that before the final battle. But maybe he should show it to some scientists first. There was an observatory on the Nexus. Maybe he should go there before he fired it. Renato had... As he set out down the path, Renato wondered why the parts of the Sky River had only surfaced now, thousands of years after the Transcendent Emperor had discarded it. This Emperor, Isengrim III, had performed terrible, bloodthirsty rituals to invoke the lost gods. Perhaps that was bringing up lost artifacts. How perfect, then, that the Sky River would reappear to be his destruction. And hopefully this time, just his destruction. He was tired of slaughter. The Sky Ripper had been built by the Transcendent Emperor. To figure it out, he just had to think like a legendary demigod. That actually wasn't as helpful as it sounded. The Sky Ripper was making a whining noise now, and its wheels were spinning so fast he could no longer see them. Renato had a thought. "Please?" he asked. The Sky Ripper began to glow. Boom! The outpost burst into flame. Ravens flapped out screaming, wings on fire. The base was his. The far speaker toad came hopping out. "Yeah, sure it will," cracked Renato. "Pull the other one."
If you don't trust me, go see Calaveras. He'll tell you the same thing.
Oh, she would say that. That sounded sensible. Why did she always have to sound sensible all the time? Oh, it was infuriating. Of course she would say that. He was supposed to hurry and bring the Sky Ripper to the council so the rebels could actually win the war. But what if she was right? Damn it. Zenobia was so frustrated.
Renato landed on the island, expecting Zenobia's ambush at any moment.
God, after all these years, she still drove him crazy. Or, unless they were part of the ambush, the obvious reasons he was meant to see to take his mind off the ones he wouldn't see. There did seem to be a lot of ravens around here.
Check, please.
Zenobia's ambush never materialized. Could she be sincere? Calaveras was a great scholar. Renato doubted even Zenobia could convince him to say something he didn't believe. And if he was working for the Empire, he'd never have told Renato about the Sky Ripper in the first place. He would listen to the wise old toad, but that didn't mean he had to agree.
Why? Why did he listen to Zenobia? She was the enemy. Of course she didn't want him to use his shiny new weapon. The thing was, though, she was appallingly honest. I mean, she wouldn't lie even to an enemy. At least she'd never lied to him. So if she said he had to see Calaveras, it probably was a good idea to see him. Ugh, it was infuriating.
Calaveras examined the Sky Ripper eagerly.
Oh, how often does a new relic surface?
He brushed off Zenobia's warning.
Oh, what do sorceresses know about physics?
However, he did know a few ways to make the weapon even more precise and more powerful, and quickly went off to tinker. Soon the Sky Ripper no longer whined, but thrummed like a hummingbird taking off. It was ready for war.
And so, Renato thanked Calaveras and took the legendary weapon to the final battle. But where were the other rebel ships? Had something happened?
He could defeat the Imperial fleet with the Sky Ripper, but he couldn't govern. He was not cut out to be Emperor, and he'd no desire to be one. There were a few rebel ships here and there, but there was no organization to the battle. Where was the Council flagship? Something had gone terribly wrong.
But he had the Sky Ripper, and the Ravens had nowhere they could hide. right to the middle of the fleet. It was a glaring weakness in the defense. You guys ever learned to swing dance?
Oh, well, too late.
The council speaker was on the deck, bleeding. Why was she even here? They found our base, she croaked. The council, all dead. We must surrender. No, we can still win this, said Reynardo. I have the Sky Ripper. He would be a real hero and save the day, even when all appeared to be lost. You're a good boy, said the speaker. And then she died. Fired at the Sky Ripper. With a tremendous whoosh, the Emperor's flagship went up in flames. And for good measure, he played the beam around it, setting all the other nearby Imperial ships on fire too. And he watched them burn.
See? He could use the Sky Ripper safely.
The few remaining rebels gave a cheer. And then they stopped cheering. There was a hole in the air. A blackness, like a tear in a parchment. Wind was blowing into it, widening it. It grew larger. Crates were falling off ship decks, upwards into the hole. And the world itself seemed bent, like the reflection on a curved mirror as it poured into the ravenous hole. He guessed that somewhere behind that ever-widening hole were gods that had long been exiled. But it didn't really matter.
Time was done for here, and soon it was.